My name is Elowen Pierce. I am 32 years old, and I still remember how every sound in the conference room seemed to amplify when my boss Nathaniel pointed at me. Everyone here is valuable to this company, except the failure in marketing. The declaration hung between us like a physical presence while 30 colleagues turned to stare. Their laughter bubbled up, some nervous, others genuinely amused. Each chuckle another needle under my skin. 5 years I'd given to this company. 5 years of arriving before the morning light touched the windows and leaving when security did their final rounds. I sat motionless, my professional smile frozen in place as Nathaniel continued discussing quarterly projections as if he hadn't just publicly decimated me. The presentation slides blurred before my eyes, but I refused to blink. Blinking meant tears, and I wouldn't give him that satisfaction, not when I'd already given him everything else. Before I tell you what happened next, could you please take a moment to think about a time when someone took credit for your hard work, or when you were made to feel small in front of others? I'm asking because what I'm about to share isn't just my story. It's about what happens when people underestimate those they step on to climb higher. What you're about to hear changed not just my career, but my understanding of power itself. I never planned to work at Altitude Marketing Solutions. Fresh out of business school with a marketing degree and ambitious dreams, I'd aimed for the creative agencies downtown. But when the economy took a downward turn, I grabbed the first offer that came my way, a junior marketing position at a mid-sized firm with a decent client roster and promises of growth. My first impression of Nathaniel Crawford wasn't negative. As the marketing director, he had an easy confidence that bordered on charm. He wore tailored suits, quoted business books in meetings, and had an impressive way of making CEOs feel understood. "We're building something special here," he told me during my interview, leaning forward with practiced sincerity. "I need people who understand that success comes from sacrifice." I believed him. So much that for the first 2 years, I accepted every assignment, volunteered for weekend work, and crafted presentations he would deliver without mentioning my contribution. "You'll get your time," he'd say, patting my shoulder as he walked away with my research notes. "This is how careers are built." The truth revealed itself slowly. First came the client meeting where I noticed Nathaniel presenting my strategy word for word, including the personal anecdote I'd written as an icebreaker. Then the company newsletter highlighting his innovative approach that I'd spent 3 weeks developing. But the real awakening came during the Westridge project. Westridge Technologies was a potential client that could double our annual revenue. Their CFO, Imogen Halsey, was notoriously difficult to impress. For months, Nathaniel had tried to secure a meeting without success. "It's impossible," he complained during a staff meeting. "They don't return calls and their gatekeepers are impenetrable." That evening, I stayed late, researching Imogen. I discovered she volunteered at a literacy program near our office. The next week, I signed up as a volunteer too. We sorted books side by side for 3 hours before business came up naturally in conversation. "You're with Altitude?" she asked, surprised. "Your firm has been persistent." "We believe in what you're building," I said simply. "But I understand if we're not the right fit." She studied me. "Your director, Crawford. He's quite confident in your pitch emails." "Confidence has its place," I answered carefully, "but I prefer listening first." 2 days later, Imogen requested a meeting, specifically asking that I attend. When I told Nathaniel, his face brightened with triumph. "I knew persistence would pay off," he said, already mentally counting the commission. "I'll handle the presentation. You can take notes." The meeting went brilliantly because Imogen directed her questions to me. Whenever Nathaniel tried to dominate, she politely redirected. By the end, she requested that I be her direct contact. Nathaniel agreed enthusiastically in the room. In the elevator afterward, his demeanor changed. "What did you do?" he demanded. "How do you know her?" I explained about the volunteer work. That's practically stalking," he sputtered. "It's unprofessional." "It's relationship building," I corrected, and it worked. The next day, Nathaniel informed me that, after consideration, he would remain Westridge's primary contact. "It makes more sense hierarchically," he explained. "You understand." I did understand. I understood perfectly. That night, I made a decision. I created a separate contact list, my personal email, my cell phone number, and began quietly providing it to key clients. For after-hours emergencies, I explained, sometimes approvals can't wait for morning. They were grateful, and they used it, not just for emergencies, but for questions, concerns, weekend thoughts, and middle-of-the-night worries. Over the next 3 years, I built a shadow network of relationships. When clients called the office, they worked with Nathaniel. When they needed actual solutions, they texted me. I answered emails at midnight, delivered last-minute changes before dawn, and remembered their children's names and school achievements. To Nathaniel and upper management, I was the adequate but unexceptional marketing coordinator who handled administrative tasks. To our clients, I was the indispensable problem solver who made their lives easier. The company systems showed Nathaniel as the account manager for our top 20 clients. Reality told a different story. 17 of those clients had my personal phone number on speed dial. 15 had never spoken to Nathaniel without me present in over a year. 12 had explicitly told me they worked with Altitude because of my service. All while Nathaniel received performance bonuses for exceptional client retention. I wasn't the only victim of his credit stealing. My colleague Dario created an award-winning campaign that Nathaniel presented as his brainchild at an industry conference. Priya developed a digital analytics system that Nathaniel showcased to the board as evidence of his technical innovation. Vihan's crisis management strategy for a difficult client became another chapter in Appling's system, Nathaniel's self-mythology. We commiserated after hours, these talented people whose work fueled someone else's reputation. But we needed our jobs, needed the references, needed the health insurance and steady paychecks. So we endured. Until that quarterly meeting. The humiliation wasn't random. Earlier that week, we had lost a potential client, the only presentation I hadn't helped Nathaniel prepare because I was managing a crisis for our largest account. The potential client had asked technical questions Nathaniel couldn't answer. Rather than admit his knowledge gap, he'd made promises our team couldn't fulfill. When I learned about these promises, I sent a private email suggesting we clarify our capabilities before contracts were signed. The client ultimately went with a competitor, citing concerns about transparency. Nathaniel needed a scapegoat. I became the failure in marketing. As my colleagues' laughter faded and Nathaniel continued his presentation, something crystallized within me. Not rage, something colder and more focused. I reached into my bag and removed a slim blue folder I'd prepared months earlier, never quite believing I would use it. Inside was evidence of what I actually contributed. Emails from clients praising my work, texts requesting my help specifically, and most damning written statements from our top accounts confirming they worked with Altitude because of their relationship with me. I rose slowly, interrupting Nathaniel mid-sentence. The room quieted as I walked to the front, placed the folder precisely in the center of the conference table and said, "For the board's review." Then I walked out. My hands trembled as I gathered my personal items. A plant, a framed degree, a sweater I kept for cold days. I didn't take my laptop or phone. Those belonged to the company. I had backups of important information elsewhere. I made it to the parking lot before I heard hurried footsteps behind me. "Elowen, wait!" I turned to see Vivienne Okafor, our CEO, clutching the blue folder and trying to catch her breath. At 57, with 2 decades of executive experience, she rarely showed anything but composed control. Now she looked genuinely alarmed. "You can't just leave," she said. "I believe I can," I replied. "My employment contract requires 2 weeks' notice, which I'm happy to provide in writing." "That's not," she took a deep breath. "You've just shown me that you personally control relationships with clients representing over 80% of our annual revenue. We need to discuss this." I looked at her directly. "Now you want to talk? After I've been publicly humiliated? After 5 years of watching my work become someone else's accomplishment?" "I didn't know," she said quietly. "You didn't want to know," I corrected. "Nathaniel delivers results. No one questioned how." She didn't deny it. "Come back inside. Not to the meeting, to my office. Please. I considered walking away. Part of me wanted the satisfaction of leaving them to discover just how dependent they'd become on someone they'd undervalued for years. But the wiser part knew that scorched earth rarely grows new opportunities. 30 minutes, I agreed. Vivienne's office occupied the corner of our floor, with windows overlooking the city. I'd been there exactly twice, once during my initial interview and once when I received a standard 3-year service award. She closed the door and took a seat, not behind her desk, but in one of the visitor chairs beside me. I've spent the last 10 minutes reading client emails about you, she said, tapping the folder. Imogen Halsey from Westridge says she would follow you to any agency. The Corrington Group apparently consults you before making marketing decisions. Not us. You specifically. 8 different clients refer to you as their actual account manager. She looked up. How did this happen without anyone noticing? People see what they expect to see, I said. You expected Nathaniel to be successful because he fits your image of success. You expected me to be forgettable because I don't demand attention. That's a significant blind spot on my part, she admitted. It's a common one. Vivienne studied me with new interest. What do you want, Elowen? A promotion? Nathaniel's job? Name it. I hadn't prepared for this question. I'd imagined walking away, perhaps with a settlement agreement to keep client information confidential. I hadn't considered that I might be given a choice. I want recognition, I said finally. Not just for me. For everyone whose work builds this company while others take credit. I want a client service model that values relationships over personalities. I want transparency in who actually handles accounts and compensation that reflects that reality. That's ambitious, she noted. So is controlling 85% of your client relationships while being called a failure in marketing, I countered. She acknowledged this with a slight nod. What specifically would this restructuring look like? For the next 20 minutes, I outlined a vision I hadn't realized I'd been developing for years. Account teams with clearly defined roles and visible contributions. Compensation tied directly to client feedback and retention. Internal systems that tracked actual client interactions rather than title-based assumptions. And Nathaniel? She asked when I finished. That depends on whether he's willing to work within a system based on accountability rather than appearance, I said. Vivienne was silent for a long moment. The board meeting is next week. I'd like you to formally present this restructuring proposal. She held up a hand as I started to object. Not as a negotiation for your continued employment. As the new director of client relationships, a position reporting directly to me. And my current position? We'll need to fill that, unless you have someone in mind who could handle marketing coordination under your leadership. The image of Nathaniel relegated to administrative support flashed through my mind. It had a certain poetic justice. I'll think about it, I said. 1 week, Vivienne agreed. No announcements until after the board meeting. In the meantime, she hesitated. How do we handle the situation downstairs? I considered this. Tell them I've taken the rest of the day for personal reasons. Nothing more until decisions are finalized. She stood, extending her hand. Thank you for not simply walking away, Elowen. It would have been justified but devastating for the company. I shook her hand. I'm not doing it for the company. I'm doing it for the people who deserve better. Walking out of the building for the second time that day felt different. The weight of decision now rested with me, not with those who had underestimated me for years. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Click the bell icon for notifications because the revenge that's coming next is something you won't want to miss. Every like helps others find this story too, especially those who might need to hear that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should worry about most. The 7 days that followed were strangely quiet. I returned to work the next morning to find curious glances but no direct questions. Nathaniel avoided me entirely. Whether from embarrassment or strategy, I couldn't tell. I performed my usual tasks while mentally preparing for the board presentation that would either transform the company or end my time there. On the 3rd day, Dario caught me alone in the break room. What happened after you walked out? He asked, keeping his voice low. Everyone's talking, but nobody knows anything. Nothing's decided yet, I answered truthfully. He studied me for a moment. Whatever you're planning, I'm with you. We all are. Me, Priya, Vihan, everyone who's watched their work become someone else's victory lap. His support touched me more than I expected. Thank you. That means more than you know. At home each night, I refined my presentation, anticipating every possible objection. I created financial projections showing how my proposed restructuring would increase retention rates and expand existing accounts. I documented case studies of similar models in other industries. I prepared responses to the inevitable concerns about disrupting established client relationships. But my most important preparation had nothing to do with slideshows or spreadsheets. It involved personal calls to our top 15 clients, explaining that changes might be coming and gauging their reactions. Without exception, they expressed the same sentiment. They wanted to continue working with me, regardless of my title or the company structure. The night before the board meeting, Vivienne called me. "Are you ready?" she asked without preamble. "Yes," I said simply. "Nathaniel requested to make a counter-presentation," she informed me. I approved it. My stomach tightened. "I see. This isn't a competition, Elowen. The board needs all perspectives to make an informed decision." "Of course," I agreed, though we both knew that's exactly what it was, a competition for the future direction of the company. "One more thing," she added. "I haven't shared the client statements with the board yet. I wanted you to present that evidence yourself." I thanked her and hung up, wondering if her decision was fairness or strategy. Either way, tomorrow would change everything. The boardroom of Altitude Marketing Solutions occupied the top floor, with windows overlooking the city skyline. 10 people sat around a gleaming table, 8 board members, plus Vivienne and the company legal counsel. Nathaniel was already there when I arrived, his expression unreadable. Vivienne made brief introductions, then turned to me. "Ms. Pierce has proposed a restructuring of our client service model. Given her unique perspective on our client relationships, the board has agreed to hear her proposal." I connected my laptop to the presentation system, took a deep breath, and began. For the past 5 years, I've observed a fundamental disconnect between how we present ourselves to clients and how we actually serve them. I started. This disconnect creates vulnerability in our business model and undervalues our most important asset, the relationships that drive client retention. For the next 20 minutes, I outlined my vision. I described how account managers actually functioned versus how they were recognized. I presented data showing correlation between client satisfaction and their access to consistent support personnel regardless of those personnel's titles. I demonstrated how our current system created bottlenecks, miscommunication, and unnecessary hierarchy. Then came the moment of truth. To illustrate the reality of our current client relationships, I've provided each of you with a folder containing communications between myself and our top 20 clients over the past year. The board members opened their folders, expressions shifting from polite interest to focused concern as they reviewed emails, text messages, and written statements from the companies that formed the backbone of our revenue. "As you can see," I continued, "these clients believe they're working with me as their primary contact, despite our internal systems listing others in that role. This isn't about individual achievement. It's about acknowledging the actual relationships that drive our business and restructuring to strengthen rather than obscure them." When I finished, the silence felt electric. Board Chairman Elias Montgomery was the first to speak. "This is enlightening," he said carefully, "and concerning. Mr. Crawford, your response?" Nathaniel stood smoothly, adjusting his tie. His presentation showed remarkable adaptation. He'd clearly prepared for a different conversation, but had adjusted his approach after hearing mine. "Ms. Pierce raises valid points about our client service model," he began, surprising me with his apparent agreement. However, her interpretation overlooks key factors. He clicked to his first slide, a chart showing client acquisition rates. "While relationship management is important, acquisition drives growth. Our current structure allows specialized roles, visionaries who bring clients in, and support staff who maintain day-to-day communication." The distinction wasn't subtle. In his framework, he was the visionary, and I was merely support staff. "Furthermore," he continued, "restructuring creates unnecessary risk. clients value stability. They appreciate knowing a director oversees their account, even if they sometimes communicate with coordinators for routine matters. His presentation continued in this vein, acknowledging my points while reframing them to preserve the hierarchy that benefited him. It was skillfully done, and I could see several board members nodding along. When he finished, Chairman Montgomery thanked us both and asked us to wait outside while the board deliberated. In the hallway, Nathaniel and I stood awkwardly distanced from each other. "Nothing personal," he said after a minute of silence. "This is business." I looked at him directly. "Everything about business is personal, Nathaniel. That's what you never understood." Before he could respond, we were called back in. The board members sat with more serious expressions than before. Chairman Montgomery addressed us. "We've reviewed both presentations and the supporting evidence. This situation reveals significant oversight in how we've managed client relationships." He turned to me. "Ms. Pierce, your documentation of client communications is compelling. It suggests a level of relationship dependency that poses both opportunity and risk for the company." He shifted toward Nathaniel. "Mr. Crawford, your points about stability and specialized roles have merit, but cannot outweigh the reality of who our clients actually trust with their business." Vivienne took over. "The board has approved a modified version of Ms. Pierce's restructuring proposal, effective immediately. We'll create a new client relationship department under Elowen's direction, with transparent attribution of account responsibilities and compensation adjusted accordingly." I maintained my professional composure, but inside, validation surged through me. "Additionally," she continued, "we're implementing a full audit of all client accounts to accurately document who manages each relationship. This will require a temporary reassignment of some personnel until the audit is complete." She turned to Nathaniel. "Mr. Crawford, your experience in presentation and acquisition remains valuable. You'll transition to new business development, focusing exclusively on bringing in new clients. Once acquired, these accounts will transition to the client relationship department for ongoing management." The demotion was tactfully presented but unmistakable. Nathaniel would no longer control existing accounts or take credit for others' relationship management. His face remained impassive, but a muscle twitched near his jaw. "The board expects full cooperation during this transition," Chairman Montgomery added, his tone making clear this wasn't a request. "We'll reconvene in 90 days to assess progress." Outside the boardroom, Vivienne pulled me aside. "We need to announce this today. The whole company should hear it directly from leadership rather than through gossip." 2 hours later, the entire staff gathered in our largest conference room. Curiosity and tension filled the air company-wide meetings. Without prior notice usually meant layoffs or major announcements. Vivienne explained the restructuring with practiced executive clarity, presenting it as strategic evolution rather than correction of a flawed system. When she introduced me as the new director of client relationships, surprised murmurs spread through the room. "Additionally," she continued, "we're establishing a team structure that properly recognizes contributions to client retention. Dario Espinoza will lead creative services. Priya Nayak will head analytics and reporting. Vihan Mehta will direct crisis management." My colleagues' faces transformed with stunned recognition. All the people whose work had been claimed by others were suddenly being elevated. Across the room, Nathaniel sat with a rigid smile, his new title noticeably absent from the announcement. Vivienne concluded with practiced optimism about our future, then opened the floor for questions. The first came from Lena in accounting. "What happens to current account assignments?" she asked. "Excellent question," Vivienne replied. "Over the next 2 weeks, Ms. Pierce will conduct a comprehensive review of all client relationships to determine who actually maintains each account. Staff will be reassigned based on documented client interaction, not previous title." Another hand rose Jorge from the design team. "Will compensation models change to reflect the new structure?" "Yes," I answered, stepping forward. "Those who maintain client relationships will receive appropriate compensation for that responsibility, regardless of seniority or previous arrangements." The implications rippled through the room. Those who had done the work would finally be recognized and rewarded for it. Those who had claimed credit would lose both status and financial benefit. As the meeting dispersed, I felt the weight of 30 different reactions. Some colleagues approached with congratulations. Others observed cautiously from a distance, calculating how these changes might affect them. Nathaniel disappeared immediately. The transformation that followed wasn't easy. Restructuring never is, especially when it challenges established power dynamics. The first week brought resistance from those who benefited from the old system. 2 senior managers threatened to quit rather than have their actual client contributions evaluated. One followed through. The other reconsidered when a major client specifically requested to continue working with his junior associate instead of him. Dario, Priya, and Vihan embraced their new leadership roles with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. During our first department heads meeting, Priya voiced what they were all feeling. "This opportunity means everything," she said, "but I'm terrified of failing. What if I can't handle the responsibility?" "You've already been handling it," I reminded her. "The only difference is now you'll get credit for it." Nathaniel's adjustment proved most difficult. New business development isolated him from existing clients and required skills he'd claimed to have but had actually delegated. Without a team to generate ideas or prepare materials, his performance quickly revealed the gaps between his reputation and his capabilities. 3 weeks after the restructuring, he appeared at my office door. "Do you have a minute?" he asked, his confident demeanor noticeably diminished. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, the same desk that had been his before our offices were reassigned. "This isn't working," he said without preamble. "I need support staff for new business development." "Everyone needs support," I acknowledged. "That's why we're building collaborative teams rather than hierarchies. I can't create presentations like your people do. I can't generate the analytics Priya provides. Without that material, I can't land new accounts." I studied him, recognizing the unfamiliar territory he found himself in, actually needing to acknowledge others' value. "You're right," I said. "No one person can do everything this business requires. That's the entire point of our restructuring." "So, you'll assign someone to prepare my materials?" "No, but I'll have our teams collaborate with you, with proper credit for their contributions. You bring valuable skills in presentation and relationship initiation. We need those skills, just as you need the support of people with different talents." He seemed about to argue, then deflated slightly. "Fine. When can we start?" "We already have. Check your email. You're included in tomorrow's creative brief for the laden pitch. Your role is clearly defined, as is everyone else's." After he left, I sat quietly, absorbing the reality of our reversed positions. There was satisfaction in it, certainly, but something else too, the recognition that true success would come not from his diminishment, but from creating a system where everyone's contributions were valued appropriately. The client audit confirmed what I already knew. Most of our major accounts maintained relationships with staff members who received little recognition for their role. We restructured accordingly, with compensation adjustments that caused our CFO visible distress, until I demonstrated how improved retention rates would offset the increased costs. 2 months into the new structure, results began speaking for themselves. Client satisfaction scores increased by 22%. Staff turnover dropped dramatically. 3 clients who had been considering other agencies recommitted to extended contracts. Most surprisingly, after his initial struggle, Nathaniel began finding his proper place. Without the pressure to appear omniscient, he focused on the relationship initiation he actually excelled at. His first successful acquisition under the new system was noteworthy not for its size but for his acknowledgement of the team that helped secure it. "I couldn't have done this without Dario's creative direction and Priya's market analysis," he said during the announcement, words I never expected to hear from him. At the 90-day board review, Vivienne presented numbers that exceeded even my optimistic projections. Chairman Montgomery nodded with satisfaction. "It appears transparency suits us," he remarked. "The question now is sustainability. Can this model continue to function as we grow?" "That's our next challenge." I agreed. "We're documenting every process and relationship dynamic to create scalable systems. The core principle remains the same, recognizing the actual work rather than the perception of work." "And what about you, Miss Pierce?" another board member asked. "Are you satisfied with the outcome of your initiative?" The question gave me pause. Was I satisfied? The restructuring had given me the recognition and authority I'd earned. It had elevated deserving colleagues and created a more equitable system. But satisfaction implied an endpoint, and I was just beginning. I'm encouraged, I answered carefully. But true success isn't measured in 90 days. It's measured in the culture we create going forward. Later that evening, as I was preparing to leave, Vivienne stopped by my office. The board is impressed, she said, particularly with how you've handled Nathaniel. They expected you to push him out. That was never my goal, I replied. Removing him wouldn't solve the underlying problem. She leaned against the doorframe. No, but it might have felt satisfying. I smiled slightly. More satisfying is watching him learn to succeed within a fair system rather than at others' expense. That's unusually gracious. It's practical. Grudges take energy I'd rather invest elsewhere. She nodded thoughtfully. We're expanding next quarter, opening the West Coast office we've discussed for years. I'd like you to oversee the client transition. That's a significant responsibility. One you've earned through demonstrated competence, not office politics. She straightened. Consider it officially offered. After she left, I sat at my desk, the desk that had once symbolized everything I couldn't access, and reflected on how thoroughly circumstances had changed. The journey from invisible contributor to recognized leader hadn't followed any path I'd imagined. The transformation hadn't come through a dramatic confrontation or public humiliation of those who had undervalued me. It had come through simply revealing the truth and creating a system where truth mattered. 6 months after that fateful quarterly meeting, I stood at the podium during our annual company gathering, preparing to announce our record growth numbers. Scanning the room, I saw a transformed organization, Priya confidently briefing new analytics staff, Vihan mentoring junior crisis managers, Dario reviewing portfolio pieces with his expanded creative team, and Nathaniel, sitting with the business development group he now led effectively rather than ceremonially, actually listening to a junior member's suggestion. When Vivienne introduced me, the applause felt genuine rather than obligatory. I stepped to the microphone, took a breath, and began. 1 year ago, I sat in this room believing my contributions would never be recognized. Today, I stand here not because that belief was wrong, but because when recognition finally came, it revealed something important. Success isn't about individual achievement. It's about creating systems where everyone's contributions matter. I proceeded with the formal presentation, sharing growth figures and client retention statistics that demonstrated the effectiveness of our restructured approach. But the most significant metric wasn't on any slide. Our employee satisfaction has increased 58% since implementing transparent attribution and compensation. People stay when they're valued for their actual contributions rather than their ability to claim credit. Afterward, as conversations flowed around me, Nathaniel approached hesitantly. That was a good presentation, he said, the compliment clearly difficult for him. Thank you. He shifted uncomfortably. I've been meaning to say, the new structure works better than I expected. Coming from him, this was monumental admission. It works because everyone contributes what they're actually good at, I said, including you. He nodded, a flash of his old confidence returning. The Meridell account. We couldn't have landed it without the team approach. I make the introduction. Dario creates the visuals. Priya provides the analytics. And you structure the relationship management. Exactly. He started to walk away, then turned back. For what it's worth, I was wrong. About you being a failure in marketing. It wasn't quite an apology, but from Nathaniel, it was the closest I'd ever get. I nodded my acknowledgement, watching as he rejoined his team. Later that evening, I stood by the windows overlooking the city lights, contemplating the journey that had brought me here. A voice interrupted my thoughts. Quite a transformation, Vivienne said, joining me at the window. Both for the company and for you. Change was necessary, I replied. Yes, but change doesn't always happen so successfully. She turned to face me. The board has authorized a new executive position, Chief Client Officer. They'd like to offer it to you. I raised an eyebrow. Another promotion? Not just a promotion. A seat on the board itself. Policy, making authority beyond just implementation. The offer represented everything I'd once thought: unattainable recognition at the highest level, influence over company direction, equality with those who had once dismissed me. "I'll need to review the details," I said, maintaining professional composure despite the surge of validation I felt. "Of course." She handed me a folder. "Review it this weekend. We'll talk Monday." As she walked away, I opened the folder and saw the compensation figure triple my current salary, plus equity options and performance bonuses. Material recognition to match the professional acknowledgement. My phone buzzed with a text from Dario. "Heard the news from Vivienne. Celebration dinner tomorrow?" I smiled and replied affirmatively, then returned to watching the city lights. The greatest revenge against those who underestimate you isn't to destroy them. It's to create something so undeniably successful that they're forced to recognize their misjudgment, and then to include them in that success on fair terms. The company flourished not because I won and Nathaniel lost, but because we created a system where winning wasn't zero-sum, where credit went where it belonged, where value was measured by contribution rather than position. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or had your work claimed by someone else, I hope this story resonates with you. The path to recognition isn't always confrontation. Sometimes it's about quietly documenting your value until the evidence becomes undeniable. It's about building authentic relationships that matter more than organizational charts. Have you experienced something similar in your workplace? Or found a way to claim recognition for your contributions? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about workplace dynamics and professional growth, because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply recognize ourselves, even when others don't.